Welcome to the KINGSBEAT podcast. I am James Hammy, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We, of course, are a Blue Wire podcast brought to you by the good folks at Prize Picks. Joining me today, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I was doing great till Brenden put that stupid Braves hat on his head. That literally went on like 30 seconds ago. One of the teams I despise the most. So fortunately, it's not a Dodgers fan, but Brenden is known for wearing baseball hats with upside down logos. Not sure why that one's not upside down, but who knew? Who knew?
I said recently, I don't care what baseball hat I wear anymore as long as it's not the Dodgers. And I went out and I wanted one that was the dark blue with the red bill. It was this or the Indians were really my options. And I like
the Guardians, sir.
Guardians.
Let's get it right.
Sorry.
Please.
Don't mean to offend anybody. Don't mean to offend anybody. You guys were both quick with that one. So I didn't even think about it until I went to post a picture and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a lot of crap for this. And I was like, oh, God, this is one of the teams Sean said he hates. So I got to wear it today.
I hate him. God,
there it is. Okay. And of course, that is Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing well. I got a new candle over Christmas.
Oh,
yeah. A watermelon lemonade, apparently.
Oh, that sounds like it would taste good.
Yeah. Hey, flavors for calendars for candles are interesting.
Yeah, buddy.
It smells good. It smells good.
I'm burning through Tree Farm still.
Tree Farm.
I ended up with dude, I'm gonna tell you, I've got a lot of candles going on. And it's I've got Staring Me in the Face, I've got Into the Night, Perfect Christmas, 'Tis the Season. Let's put this down a little bit. Mahogany Balsam, Pumpkin Apple, and then of course Sassy, which Brenden was so happy to provide for me.
Got a couple going on here too.
Got a few.
Look at you guys with your ridiculous.
So great.
It's like Jan from The Office dropped by with all of her candles, and you guys said, "Okay, I'll take some."
I also got a little aromatherapy thing, I guess you would call this.
Look at that.
You know, it's pretty cool.
I don't go that far.
Smells going on in here. It was a gift.
I know you
do. Yeah.
Okay, Sean.
Seems like you guys are getting all fancy. I'm a married man, so we don't have like candles everywhere. I don't need candles to freshen up the room all the time. I live the married life,
buddy.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm highly successful at my game, Sean. I'll turn 25 years married in July, Sean.
Sure. I bet if you had that conversation, she'd appreciate some candle.
Some candles. There we go. We have candles in the house. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to the KINGSBEAT podcast. Sorry, we are wandering through the first 3 minutes of the pod. It's typical. We meander. We sometimes go on a walkabout here in the first few minutes as we settle in.
I have a lot of topics we can hit on. I mean, have you seen what people are doing for these Stanley Cups? Like, what the hell, man? These tumblers?
We have like 4 or 5 of them.
Why is this such a thing?
It's like Cabbage Patch Kids all over again.
Yeah, this is wild. Like,
I don't understand.
I've got a tumbler too. I have the I forget what name of it is, but these Stanley ones, like Stanley, as in like the Stanley tools, like the tape measure. Yeah, I guess they're like super popular.
Well, they used to make like Stanley thermoses, like the coffee thermos, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it keeps stuff cold longer than like your Costco variety of the big tumbler, like the big chrome ones. So I don't know, but I'm not gonna go get in a fight at the Target over a red and pink one. I just think it's weird.
It used to be like hydro flasks a couple of years ago, right? Like not even long ago. Is this the same genre of cup we're talking about?
Except for the hydro. The problem with the hydro is it's not easy to get into the hydro flask. Like you either have the big wide mouth, which I don't know who sits there and drinks out of the wide mouth one, or
wide mouths.
You got to grab the top with the straw. I don't know. They became too much of a problem to get in and out of. We have those two at the house. You know, my boys have them with like stickers all over them from like all the places that you go or like fast food spots. Here we are meandering again.
By Stanley Cups. Yeah.
I don't know why we're meandering, but
I got plenty of topics. There's a lot of there's a
Sean
lot we
just
can hit
keeps
on.
throwing stuff out there.
You look
So
at
if you're
I was a little bit of a bait and you took it. Who knew that all your kids had stickers all over theirs? And
Sean, ridiculous.
sorry,
If you're watching here on YouTube and you
why
don't
wouldn't you
mind,
be?
give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already a subscriber. Outside of that, jump on board with the King's Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com and become a premium subscriber, so you get invitations to everything that we do here at the King's Beat. We are, of course, a Prize Picks sponsored podcast, so give Prize Picks a try. You can go to, I think it's prizepicks.com/KingsBeat. I think the password is KingsBeat, all one word, to jump on board with Prize Picks. I played last night and I was looking so incredibly good. I actually had it lined up. I had chosen Domantas Sabonis with more than 13 rebounds. Check. I chose Keegan Murray with more than 0.5 dunks, which is actually a really sneaky good one to play lately. And that dude just keeps dunking the ball all over the place. I had De'Aaron Fox under 36.5 minutes played, which I was sitting perfectly fine because the game looked like it would end in regulation. And then I had Paolo Banchero at less than 26.5 points, which was spectacular when he went out of the game in the third quarter. And it was like, is he going to come back? Is he not going to come back? Yeah, I lost. Paolo ends up with 43. De'Aaron Fox just keeps playing minutes because they keep playing basketball. So either way, I'm having a good time playing Prize Picks. If you're out there and you want to give it a shot, there's a link in the description down below. They've got all kinds of things, like they match up to $100 if it's your first time doing Prize Picks. You can bet. You can choose between football, basketball, baseball, whatever sport you want. So you can mix and match. It's good stuff. Give Prize Picks a look if you are so inclined. Let's get to the basketball. Sacramento Kings are about as erratic a team as you can possibly find. And we're going to dive into these two games that they just had on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday night, of course, the Sacramento Kings stumble against a horrific Charlotte Hornets team that had lost 11 consecutive games. We're playing on the second night of a back-to-back. We're missing 4 starters. I don't know. Where are you guys at with this team when it comes to losing to bad teams, beating semi-good teams or good teams, and then finding ways to just disappoint you with losses like the one we saw on Tuesday to Charlotte?
I mean, it's tough. It's hard to find a logic, like obviously you can look at each individual game. You look at that Charlotte game and 21 turnovers is just going to do it. It says 20 on ESPN. I'm pretty sure the official count was 21, at least on the box scores that we got, that tied their season high. And that also got tied in that game against the Magic, which was a double overtime. But the other game that also had 21 was that overtime win that they snuck away from the Portland Trailblazers at home early in the year. So this is the most they've had in regulation by a good bit. The next was 17 there. And that's an easy way to kind of shoot yourself in the foot. It was a lot of self-inflicted issues when it came to the Kings in that game, what they would call like the controllables. And that's turnovers. That's missing 7 free throws in a game that you lost by that much. Obviously, they're 30th in the league in free throw attempts. Like, there's just some games where the discipline with those controllables don't quite seem to be there, that the execution is just not being handled the right way. And I still go back to the big wins that they have over every team above them in the Western Conference probably outweighs the bad losses in my mind. Since you're still sitting here at 20-13, that's a great record in my mind relative to expectations coming into the year. But I don't know. It's really hard to figure out a potential logic here.
Yeah, Sean, we talk about the turnovers and like it's hard to beat on Domantas Sabonis. Like he's been so good, so spectacular this season, so consistent. 11 turnovers in that game is just outlandish. I don't think we'll ever see another game where he has 11, although he did back it up with 6 turnovers
I was gonna say he got pretty close last night.
the win over Orlando. But some of the turnovers in that game, I think he had 4 offensive fouls, which are turnovers. And I think what Brennan's talking about, and Mike Brown even mentioned it. He's like, it's not like somebody like went to make a cut and then stopped the cut and somebody threw a ball and it bounced out of bounds. He's like, it wasn't even those turnovers, or, a skip pass that gets picked off or something. He was like, it was just almost like foolish turnovers. I don't even know what to make of it. I mean, when Charlotte had 8 steals in a game where the Kings had 13 turnovers, and most of these were just give it away and unforced errors. Do you think it is a mental thing? Do you think it was like a mental lapse game coming off a long road trip? I don't like to use that as an excuse at all. And it wasn't even that long of a road trip. But where are you at with what happened in that game?
It was just a bad game. I thought they came out completely overlooking their opponent. Probably thought they could sleepwalk through it. Probably thought that somebody was gonna just rise to the occasion and start carrying them, kind of like you've grown accustomed to someone like Domantas Sabonis or De'Aaron Fox or even Malik Monk to be able to do. But there was just a lazy approach I felt to that game. Mike Brown called it out. You saw a lot of criticism from Mike Brown in a variety of different areas. I think the most alarming of them, and I think he agreed, was that there was no sense of urgency down the stretch of that game. Despite how bad they played against a very, very bad team, it was there for the taking. And then when they went, okay, nut cutting time to turn it on and close these guys out, they made so many blunders along the way, and it came from about 5 different people. So it wasn't really like you could hang it on any one person. Certainly the turnovers from Domantas Sabonis stick out like a sore thumb, and I mean, I don't think you'll ever see that again from him. I was completely surprised at the 11 turnovers. But I also feel, and this was something that I was alluding to after talking to some people, it's like no one really took the bait except for really Domas, which was they rely on him for so much that whether he's throwing the ball off the rim and trying to follow that up, the ball squirting through his hands like it did on several occasions, or certainly as James, as you mentioned, the offensive fouls. I think honestly, he took them out of their normal rhythm, and it kind of created some confusion throughout what they were trying to do offensively. Now that might be a little bit of an overreaction, but certainly I think it played a role down the stretch when other guys were trying to do other things, and then you have, like, again, 4 or 5 different players make a sort of blunder that ultimately kind of cost them the game. But again, it's one of those games, and that probably segues nice into what happened last night, because uh, I felt like last night had a very ho hum type of start against a team that's really good. But if you really analyze the Orlando Magic, it's like, man, they're down some of their big players, and then they're also losing some of their big players. Franz Wagner goes out, Gary Harris goes out, and then you're playing against a bunch of guys that you didn't really have in the scouting report, and that can be dangerous for a team like the Kings.
Yeah, I mean, I want to stick with the Charlotte game for one more minute because there is the incident that happens in the middle of the Charlotte game, and that is that Malik Monk gets yanked after 5 minutes in the second quarter, and or maybe it was 5 minutes combined between the first and second quarter, and he appeared to come in with like the same lackluster like vibe that the rest of the team did, and Mike Brown sort of took exception to it. There was a play where he underhands a ball, like when Sabonis isn't even looking, and like hits him in the chest, and Sabonis gets tagged for a turnover. There were like a number of just like lackadaisical plays. Mike pulls him off the floor, sits him, which I think surprised everybody. And that, of course, like teased us because we're like, okay, Malik Monk played 5 minutes. That's not normal. Then we're watching the third quarter play out. Early third quarter, Monk goes in the game, hits a couple of threes. may have said something to Mike Brown as he runs by. Kings take a timeout right after that. Mike Brown comes over and starts to have a loud conversation with Malik, goes to, cooler heads prevail, goes to walk away. Malik says something back to him. Next thing you know, Mike turns around and he's chirping back at Malik, and this is playing out in front of everybody. And then we have, sort of the, I don't know what happens afterwards. Like, the Kings don't respond that well. Malik is asked about it. Mike's asked about it. What were your takeaways on this? Because Sean, I know, like, right away we both saw it playing out on the court, because you could, going into the timeout, you could see that Mike Brown was stewing. He walked out onto the court. He started like pacing around in the key on their end of the court, and then as soon as Malik sits down, he goes over, and we have like this. These things happen, but a little bit of a weird moment. But you were recording the whole time.
Yeah, well, I wanted to see mainly who he was talking to. I didn't know right away that comment or look was made for Mike after he hit the three, and figured when they went back to the bench, he would, probably have a jovial moment with somebody, because this team loves to talk shit to each other, and it's a healthy environment there. And then, yeah, certainly it became something that, again, I don't think it was a huge deal. This is for what par for the course for what Mike Brown does for a lot of his players and holding them accountable. And him and Malik and Mike have a very real relationship, and it's one where you can see someone, cuss the other one out, and they'll be just fine. That's what, again, I like to say, it's what coaching looks like. And uh, the good news is you see Malik Monk kind of pat him right on the back right after everything was done. I mean, it's all fine. It's not like this is a huge moment of friction in between with chemistry issues or anything like that. It isn't anything like that. And the best part about it is, if say what you will, I mean, it inspired Malik to kind of bring that team to life a little bit. Certainly he did that against Orlando, but the thing that really sticks out from that is hearing Mike Brown talk about it after the win over Orlando, which is that they talked about it. They had an office meeting. They sat down and they talked about not only that issue, but he apologized for him with the way that things had been handled in that game, and didn't apologize necessarily for benching him, but for just ultimately the way Mike coached him and handled him. And I would push back a little bit on that. I mean, I think Mike Brown's looking at his team and looking at the overall big picture, and I think we talked about it a little bit, James, in the previous podcast. But let's say you lost to Atlanta, still give you the win in Memphis, but this thing could look a hell of a lot different, very easily. And you're looking at a team that could have very well lost upwards of 7-8 games out of 10 in the of their last 10, had things gone a certain way. And I think he's trying to, really kind of shake them out of some habits. I think he knows that he's got, what is it, 4 home games here in 6 nights. The Hornets are terrible. You should be able to sleepwalk through that game and still win, knowing that you've got a game the next night against the Magic as well. These are sometimes where you find moments in the season to have some coachable, teachable moments and try to get a message across or whatever it is. I don't think benching Malik Monk, of all people, in that first few minutes was the right move. Mike didn't apologize for that move specifically. He thought that was the right move because he was not playing up to his standards. But I think there's a lot of evolution going on with this Kings rotation right now, certainly by virtue of seeing Chris Duarte in the starting rotation, Kevin Huerter now coming off the bench, and you're seeing Davion Mitchell back in the mix as well. So you're not really seeing anybody's minutes from the guard rotation. Like, you're adding more guards to it. And you're not really seeing this okay, we're sitting you necessarily, other than really Keon Ellis, right? But to me, I think there's a lot of figuring out that they're having to do and trying to find the right energy. And I think Mike Brown mentioned this before the Orlando game, saying that in doing so with Chris Duarte, and I think even he was asked about Sasha Vezenkov, obviously a forward, that he can make he obviously is the head coach. He's going to make moves at any point he can do so. But nobody has separated themselves that drastically from the pack of players that aren't playing to the ones that now are. And you just don't have that separation. So, we saw JaVale McGee come in again the other night after not seeing him for a while, and think Alex Len gets a DNP after a guy who's really been playing kind of well over his stretches since coming back from that injury. So I think that even saw a little bit of surprising stuff there. So Mike Brown just really kind of going through it. But to your question, James, about like that moment, I don't think it's much. I think they just have a very good relationship that way, to where they can have these honest conversations. They can jump each other's shit. They can get in the face of each other. And look, it was just a few games ago where Mike Brown is talking about Malik Monk as being a leader on this team, telling his coaching staff not to talk to the officials, really trying to rally the troops. You see in that Orlando game where it ends up being a flagrant foul, he goes over to Anthony Black just to have a conversation, and the coaches are running off the bench thinking they're going to break up an altercation, and he's like, no, calm down, it's nothing like that. So it's Malik Monk is a polarizing dude, and you can and the camera finds him, and I think he's quickly becoming a fan favorite.
I think it seemed like a healthy conversation, like coach complimented post game after that Orlando one, talking about the sort of, I guess, incident that happened in the Charlotte matchup, that he was really complimentary of his relationship with Malik and how real and honest that Malik is. And coach takes a lot of pride in doing the same. And I think that they both obviously have the same goal here. And that's a good formula for a solid coach player relationship. But like Malik did play really bad, I thought, in that first stretch. Like the starters were up 18-8 at the beginning there. He checks in, and this isn't all his fault, but by the time he checks out, that is down to 22-21 with a Charlotte lead, so the bench did come in, and I thought had a pretty tough, I believe it was Malik, Trey, and Davion that check into the game pretty early there, and they didn't have a good stretch. Like James mentioned, that underhand pass to Domas that was super lazy, and he wasn't the only one to make a lazy underhand pass throughout the course of the game, but Mike mentioned those sort of passes post game. He took a crazy shot with like 20 seconds left on the shot clock, caught it in the corner with his back turned, and just pivoted and threw up a crazy shot. And he also had a really bad defensive play where his guy was cutting, and he sort of let him walk to the rim fairly freely and fouled him and gave up an and one and put his hand in the air afterwards, knowing that it was his fault. So I understand the frustration with how Malik was playing in that stretch. But coach did explain, like, it was just how I communicated that rather than the actual sitting him that he viewed as the issue or what he should have done better. But I did think that was a pretty tough stretch from Malik, and it looked like Sacramento might be able to take care of that game pretty early and ride a lead. But when that bench unit came in that first quarter, their early 10-point lead evaporated super quick. And by the end of the first, you're trailing by 4, and it became like a close game pretty much the whole time.
Yeah. And I would say the only thing that I didn't like, I'm fine with Mike going and apologizing and having a sit down in the room with Malik. And I get what Mike's saying, that he should have coached him in that moment, that he shouldn't have just sat him and like pulled him and then sat him the rest of the half. But at the same time, like with a player like Malik, he's got a ton of energy and he's got sass to him, right? He's got a big personality. And I think we all know that the only thing you can really do to Malik, the only way to really, I think, get to him is to take away his minutes. Like, he's one of those guys. He's just a mad hooper. That's all he wants to do. All he wants to do is play basketball. And a lot of those guys, the only way to get through to them is not to sit there and have like a quiet conversation on the sidelines, or like to pull a guy like Terrence Davis out on the floor and show him what he's doing wrong. I think sometimes the only way to reach a guy like Malik is to take away what he loves, and that is playing time. And so I didn't have any issue with what Mike was doing. I got what he was doing, and I don't think he needed to apologize. Does him and Malik have to get back on the same page? Sure. Do they apologize to each other for handling a situation a little strangely? I'm sure they did. So I'm okay with how the outcome is. I would just say, like, I don't think he needed to really apologize. Like, you're the coach. A player came in and wasn't ready to play, and it was against his former team. and you sent a message that was probably embarrassing because, of course, Malik wants to do nothing but stomp that team that drafted him and then kind of squandered his talent for 3 years. But if you're not ready and you're not coming out with the right mentality and it hurts the team, the overall product, then okay, you got to do what you got to do as a coach. So you brought up a couple of things. We've got all kinds of things to throw in here. We have the Kevin Huerter, Chris Duarte situation, which I think unfortunately for Chris, one game looks brilliant, the next game is just a complete dud, and he's going to need time to kind of grow in to what he's doing. But we also have this situation with Huerter, where Huerter might be one of your better trade chips, and he's playing so poorly that you don't know how to clear up that situation and get him in the right frame of mind. And I'm just wondering, we'll discuss it, but when you guys look at the two players, it makes sense that because De'Aaron Fox is now averaging 30 points a game, that you can try something different at the shooting guard spot. You can go away from a natural scorer in Kevin Huerter and go to a more defensive-minded jack of all trades player and Chris Duarte. I don't have any problems with the move at all. Early in the season, when De'Aaron Fox was averaging, when he was the player he was the previous year, when you're coming into the year and you're like 25 points a game, but he shoots 32% from three, you need the floor spacer next to him type deal. But that's no longer, number one, who Kevin Huerter is. And it's also De'Aaron Fox is a different player. And I think it allows you to mix and match in different ways. Do you guys see what I'm talking about? Does that make sense that like maybe at a certain point, Chris Duarte is more like Doug Christie than he is Mike Bibby? And it's okay to have a Doug Christie player when you have a guy who's averaging 30 points a game next to him.
I mean, this is kind of KZ Okpala, Mo Harkless all over again, no? Just at a different position.
I just think that Chris Duarte is a much better player, a much better offensive player.
No, and I agree. But you're putting a guy out there that is kind of a defensive focused player to try to bolster that part of your starting lineup and really your team in general. They're sitting at 17th in defensive rating, which is a decent improvement from where they were at last year. But they had some recent duds defensively. Obviously that game against Portland is probably the worst of them when you're on the road and just totally blow that game against a team that really had been struggling. I know Scoot's been playing well recently, but there's no reason to lose that game the way you did. Giving up 71 points in the first half in Atlanta is a really bad look, even if it was, made up for in that second half and you still come away with a look. But it just feels like you need that more defense out there. And to your point, James, when De'Aaron's playing the way he is and you have all the other guys out there, in my mind, are offensive first weapons, not saying that they're all horrible defensively or anything like that, but their primary production in my mind comes on the offensive end of the floor, then except maybe Keegan Murray throughout the course of this year, then it makes sense to slot a defensive guy in there. This team needs to be better on that end of the floor, specifically when it comes to consistency. And I think it's a lot easier to give a guy like Chris Duarte minutes alongside for other starters. Am I still here?
Yeah, he's good. You're good. James froze.
Gotcha. I think it's a lot easier to give a guy like Chris Duarte that isn't the best offensive player minutes to survive on that end of the floor when he's around four other starters. And you could try to bolster that lineup a little bit in that way.
Well, and to that point, yeah, I mean, to that point, it's like if you had to pick somebody in the rotation who's been inconsistent, and I know a lot of people point the finger at Harrison Barnes, but I hope the game last night against Orlando kind of showed some of the value that Mike Brown sees in Harrison Barnes, because believe it or not, Harrison Barnes was fantastic in that game, and he didn't nearly get the credit that he deserved. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the scoring, the points that he put on the board, and had everything to do with what they were doing to try to change what they were doing defensively, because everything that they had going on in that game was to take away the paint, and the blitzing that they started to do was Harrison Barnes was really, really good in that department. So but to the point of Kevin Huerter, who has shown the ability to rebound the basketball of late, especially this season in the face of a lot of struggles offensively. I think the overarching belief there is that if Kevin Huerter isn't hitting shots, then he's no good to you. And if you can supplant one person to come in for defense, that's the one to do it. It also gives Kevin Huerter the opportunity, in theory, to get it done, to just let it fly, find your shot, go out there against some lesser opponents, as opposed to what starting rotations look like, and try to find any reason to just find your shot again. So I don't think it's a complete abandoned ship of, you won't see Kevin Huerter as a starter going forward, but at least for the foreseeable future, Mike Brown seems to be very much in the camp of, let's reward Chris Duarte and see how this fits. Let's give this a 10-game sample size, or more. And pointing out, albeit that he only played 10 minutes, he was out of the rotation very, very quickly last night against Orlando, and James Vam has returned.
Yeah, I have returned. Yeah, I would say to that point, the real starting shooting guard on this team, the guy who plays the most minutes, it's not Kevin Huerter, it's not Chris Duarte, it's not Keon Ellis, it's Malik Monk. And so, realistically, you're looking for the guy that can start the game and that can start the second half. But Malik Monk might be the guy who's going to play the entire fourth quarter. And I think by going to a guy like Duarte, you are kind of making a statement like, look, we are going to a more defensive-minded look. And I think it's great, because the problem that I've had lately is the inline drives attacking Domantas Sabonis again, where Sabonis gives up, what did Rudy Gobert had, like 21 points and 17 rebounds or whatever. Most of Rudy Gobert's points came on rotations where Domantas Sabonis had to go rotate over to stop an inline drive and leave Gobert for a wide open dunk. And that was on the guards. That wasn't on Domas. It was on the players that are on the front line, not on the back line. And he's just the one who looks bad in the situation. Like, Gobert didn't have post-ups against Domantas Sabonis. So I get why Mike's doing this. And again, I don't disagree. I think it's a moment where, again, De'Aaron Fox becomes a different player and allows you to do something slightly different with your backcourt. I also think that Kevin Huerter has an opportunity to get more shots with the second unit than he would with the first. But what we're seeing from Huerter right now is a problem. He can't hit shots in warmups. He has a hitch in his shot, and it's clearly mental. And I don't know what's happening there, but it started with preseason and the way Mike kind of handled that situation. May have even started it in the playoffs, where he just completely
started the 3-point shootout.
It might have started in the 3-point shootout, but you know what? He bounced back after the 3-point shootout. But those are moments where you're starting to look at Kevin in a different way, and it's unfortunate, but this team needs to move forward defensively. They've got enough scores, and if De'Aaron Fox is going to go out there and average 8.9 3-point attempts per game, and he's going to shoot 40% on his threes, okay. You don't need another guy next to him who's going to average 7 threes a game. You can use a guy that can do a bunch of different things. That, in his first game, he goes out and grabs 7 rebounds. At Duarte, he grabs 7 rebounds, and then 3 of those he put back for offensive putbacks. So he had 6 points that he created for himself that you're just not getting. You're not getting it from Harrison Barnes. You're not getting it from Kevin Huerter. You want more shots, you want more points to go on your ledger, then go get them. And I think Chris Duarte just showed you, it's just sitting there. Why is no one else doing this? And to be honest with you, again, I'm all for it. If you can find a different look without giving away so much on the offensive end, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. And the one thing I'll add, just to Kevin's credit, is even though he's just under 34% from the year, he's still going to get defended like he's a 40% 3-point shooter. When he's out there, he's spacing the floor. You know what I mean? It's not like teams are just going to be happy with him taking open threes. He's still getting top locked. He's still cutting back door. He's still sprinting his ass off pretty much every single possession, I feel like, in the half court or in the open court. And eventually, I think these shots are going to go down again. He's too good of a shooter for it to stay this way. He's a career 38. You go through the years, like 34 this year, 40 last year, 38.9. There is a 36.3 in there, 38, 38.5. Like he's a good shooter and he still gets defended that way. And that does a lot for the other guys when he's out there, just to his credit still.
Yeah, physically, there's nothing wrong with Kevin Huerter. Like, I mean, he's out there running.
Aside from his hand, he's got a left hand problem, but
yeah,
that's about it.
I don't know how bad the left hand problem is, though. I mean, it was like
he's able to play for sure.
Yeah. So, like, but I mean, physically, I mean, he's running, he's hustling, that's not the problem. And like Sean, you brought up the rebounding thing. He was really good early in the season, like going out and helping in other ways. He stopped doing that too. Like him and Harrison Barnes are like dueling for Coke machine status on each and every night. I mean, Harrison Barnes has to answer for it too. Like, what in the world? How is it that, like, in a double overtime game, you found a way to get to 3 rebounds? Keegan Murray had 12. Not only did Keegan Murray have 12, Keegan Murray had 6 rebounds in the double overtime session. And sometimes it's about like, hey, the effort needs to change. Like, whatever it is that you're doing, like, I don't know, maybe watch what Chris Duarte did for a game and go out there and find some rebounds that weren't there before. So, yeah, I don't know. Either way, I think that Mike Brown is he has to tinker because his team is odd. Does that like this team, the way that they win big games, the way that they lose easy games, the way that they lose by 20 and win by 25, like none of it makes a whole lot of sense right now. And I think it's because when you're comparing teams, you're usually comparing them to either previous versions of themselves or to some other team. And like the Kings were really good last year at being resilient and not getting blown out in games and not having bad losses. And the bad losses this season have accumulated so quickly where you're at like 6 games where you're like, oh, that's a bad loss. And I don't know how like to compare them to something other than who they were last year. And then you look and they have a better record than last year, but it doesn't feel as good, does it?
Well, I mean, look, that's the part where perspective comes in because, again, you could at the end of the day, whether it's a 20-point win, a 20-point loss, it's a win or a loss. It doesn't. It can change the feel, but it shouldn't. It's like it's at the end of the loss. So they come into 24 just like they did with 23 with the same amount of win total at the time, which was 19. So
Yeah, but that I
the
mean, just on
the
that point, Sean, they're
yeah.
way further ahead. They had 19 wins last year, but they've played the games are different. So they were
Yeah,
not
I
6
mean,
games over 500 or 7 games
you
over
also
500 going to
yeah,
last year.
you also have the in-season tournament. You have I mean, scheduling is a little wonky. Like there's things you're dealing with. There's, injuries have been part of a storyline this year, whereas last year it wasn't really a storyline. Availability was key for the Kings. They didn't have they didn't have this kind of what I would call identity crisis like they have this year. They have one night they might look like the team that can go out there and be the top scoring team in NBA history or even in the league. And then next night it's like, why are you running in mud? Where has this come from? So um I feel like, there's just such a hyper focus from game to game that it takes away from kind of the big picture. But the reality is that this team is very much still what they are. Like their shortcomings are still the same shortcomings they had last year. The stuff they do well are the things that they still do well. I would say that their shooting, you could probably talk about, there could probably be a discussion that maybe it's not as good as once believed. And certainly you can kind of look at Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes and certain guys that have struggled to Keegan Murray for sure in his start. That hasn't been like those 3 players in themselves started the season last year very, very well. I mean, through January, we're all shooting at very high levels and all that stuff, but you're obviously focusing more on the defensive end as well. So there are discussions to be had there, but to me, the overarching theme is this team is what they are, exactly what they were last year, and they excel at certain things, and that they have certain holes and problems, and they have positions within their rotation that need to be upgraded. And they're hoping that that happens by evolution, that certain players step into their own and become better. Some have. I think De'Aaron Fox has shown that he's been able to become something that a lot of people didn't think he'd become, which is this 30-point scorer there, or hovering around 30-point scorer. I don't know that that's the best recipe for Kings success, though. So, like, I think that kind of enters the chat as the calculus is this trade deadline nears, is like, do you really want De'Aaron Fox to be this guy who's out there having to score 30 points in effort to make your team successful for the long run? And I don't know that that's in the best interest for Fox. I don't know that that's in the best interest for the Kings. It's certainly fun to watch, but right now there's just some disoriented kind of rotational things that are happening, and they want this team to get better on its own. Defensively, they want them to move up, from dead last to possibly top 20, things like that. Can they make strides on their own before they really go in there and start really dissecting and making changes? So this next month should be pretty interesting, I think.
And
Yeah.
you made a lot of your money last year on the offensive end of the floor. Obviously, this year you're not catching anybody off guard. Like, teams are
Right.
ready for you when you come in. And obviously the shooting plays a factor. I really look at Keegan and Kevin, 34% just under for Kevin and 35.5% for Keegan, two guys that were 40% throughout the course of last year, two guys that were elite last year, really, just among the entire league when it came to threes. So that plays a part, but you're also just not catching anybody off guard. People know what you want to run, and they're not. Mike likes to say that they're the hunted rather than the hunters. And I don't know that I necessarily think they're being hunted, but I understand the logic there, that they are not being totally looked over when teams are seeing them on their schedule. So your offense was bound to fall a little bit throughout the course of this process, but it is funny how, we could sit here and have all these questions, and they're on pace for 49.5 wins.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say this though, I'd like to kick back a little bit. Like the Kings last year, I think they set the record with 118.6, right? Offensive rating. That it was the highest offensive rating in the history of the game. That would be 7th this season. Like the Pacers, the Celtics, the Bucks, the 76ers, the Thunder, the Hawks are all well above that at this point. Like even those last two teams, they're a full point above where the Kings finished last year. Like offense has become the game this season, and everyone is just blowing up, and the defensive ratings are trash. Like I know the Kings went from like 22nd to 16th in one game the other day because everyone is bulked up. Like they're all like around each other, like 115.2, 115.3, 115.4. Either way, that's bad. It's a horrible defensive rating. And like the Kings have moved up to the top of that heap, and they're right around 15, 16 right now. That's fine. But their offensive rating is like 112. And so while I think that, yeah, maybe the league has figured out the Kings a little bit, I don't think really, because they haven't figured out any of these other teams. I think at the end of the day, the Kings aren't playing well. Like, and I would like to tell you that, it's just that they're a very similar team. But they're not. If you ask me what their identity is right now, I would tell you I don't know what their identity is. And last year, I knew exactly what their identity was. It was a crazy offensive team that was resilient as hell. They didn't lose 4 games in a row after the first 4 games of the season. Every time that you thought that they might slip up and lose a game, they punched somebody in the face. They had countless games where they went into the alleged trap game and ran over somebody. They didn't have bad losses, at least not to this point in the season. That's not who this team is. It's not the same team. It's not a resilient team. It's a team that's laid down 10 times this season. It's a team that's lost at home to Charlotte, who had lost 11 in a row on the second night of a back-to-back, missing 4 starters. That is some next level under Alvin Gentry losing to the Philadelphia 76ers, bad, shitty Kings. That's what that is. And so, like, these are things where I would point to and say, hey, look, this isn't the same team. They might be trying to tinker and stuff and trying to change some things, but they got to figure out who they are, because the record be damned, this team's bounced in the first round if they're facing anyone with any size and athleticism and physicality. They face the Clippers in the first round, they're done. They face the Pelicans in the first round, they're done. So I that's where I'm looking and saying, hey, you guys can say that they're the
Well,
same team. They're not the same team. They're not nearly as good and consistent. They might be a better like overall group. The talent might be better, but who they are as a team is not better. And I
I
think
mean,
that would be my bigger concern.
I don't know. I kind of there are things in there I agree with, but I kind of push back because like you said, like no, they've only lost their biggest losing streak is 3 in a row.
And they lost
Yeah, they've lost
2 in a row 2 times.
I mean,
outside of that.
they I think it's the way they've lost, and I think that's what that resonates the most. And again, if you're going in there and you just take it for what it is, I think that, like last night, I think they overcame a lot of adversity. Orlando certainly overcame some adversity for some of the players that were dropping like flies, but you don't have points you don't have some calls go your way. You don't you're having to make adjustments on the fly. There's two ways you can look at it. Like it's a glass half full, glass half empty, right? The reality is it's still half, in my opinion. I think they play right now in a way that is similar because they're losing. Look, the way they're losing games, certainly you can talk about it as you just laid out, but like winning in the first round, they didn't win in the first round last year, James. You know what I
No,
mean?
no,
Like
but they
there's
took a team like a championship team, the champions from the year before, to 7 games. Like, and
right, but
again, like Sean, I get what you're saying, but like there is no resiliency in these losses. There is nothing in these losses.
Yeah,
But there is
I
the
mean,
next game. You know what I mean? They
right.
don't like hold
It's
on to it necessarily.
exactly. It's a
Well, I
next game
mean,
mentality. Yeah.
it's good to be a goldfish. I get you, but you're still a goldfish, because that's what they
What does
look
that
like.
mean? I have no idea what that means. Goldfish
Okay,
get
so a
flushed.
goldfish
I don't
doesn't
know what we're
have
talking about.
a goldfish doesn't have a like a
Are you
short-term
talking about
memory
short-term memory? Okay, short-term
at
memory.
all, right? That's fine. But if you turn around and every single time you oh, we don't have a short-term memory, it's like, well, maybe you should. Maybe you should remember
Yeah,
that you lost to a bad team last night. Maybe that's what you
but
should do, because
that's
here's what I would say. Like you say, they faced some adversity in the game yesterday. The adversity they faced is a team that's bad at shooting threes just caught fire. And I get
right.
it. And they fought through the adversity. Name another time where they fought through adversity this season, because every other time I
Atlanta?
remember them facing adversity outside of Atlanta, and then early in the season, the Warriors, that like 9 out of their 13 losses, they lay
Yeah.
down. They lay down and go,
Y
we just got thumped.
yeah, but okay, so to that point though, last year, okay, it's again, they took advantage of their early schedule, right? Like this again, the whole you're not catching anybody, the whole hunter thing. I agree with you, Brendan. That's not like a thing, but teams aren't sleeping on the Kings anymore. And I think we can all agree that when you play Sacramento, you have to have your track shoes ready. Teams don't want to they don't all the time want to play that way, and they're coming into Sacramento and they're preparing for the Kings as a way where it's a team that matters. It's a team that you have to be ready for. You can't take lightly, and like it or not, there are teams that you can take lightly. The Charlotte Hornets are one of them. And the Kings are getting a lot of teams on the second nights of back-to-backs. Like both of their back-to-back that they had with the Hornets and the Magic this season, or just this week alone, both teams were on the second nights of back-to-backs. Point being is, I agree with you. There are certainly flaws within this Kings team, but by and large, they play like a 500 basketball team at various points of the season. And they're in one of their stretches right now where one night they can look great and the other night they can look bad. But again, if you take it from a view from 50,000 feet or however long you want to look at, like the over thing, when you look at it record wise, this team is very similar. And again, their problems and their strengths are very, very similar to last year. That's all I mean is
No, I get
I
what you're
think
saying. I would just say, I would even kick back a little bit and say, like, look, this isn't even a particularly fast team. They're 10th in
right.
the league in pace. We watched them, Mike Brown, tell us that they were going to run, and then they walk the ball up the court like half the time.
Yeah. Well,
I don't
the
know.
Kings, I would group the Kings, like I said in the last podcast, I would group the Kings in a very similar situation as some of these other teams in the West right now that they haven't figured it out. Like they're a
Oh
lot of
no.
these teams are 500 right now. And they're, you don't know whether they're players or not, right? The Kings for even for them looking like the tough spots at various places, they're still 5th in the West.
Yeah. They're 5th in the West,
So,
but that's precariously. I mean,
well, I
you're
mean, you got
like
to give
2
it,
games
it
out
is
of
what it
being.
is.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying that last season we didn't see a bunch of bad losses. And this season, man, there's too
But you
many.
also won a lot of games that you probably shouldn't. They probably had no business winning, and they were able to capitalize on that early season success.
Okay.
But
They're
again, at
really
the end of the
good.
day,
You got
yeah. No, I'm just saying at the end of the day, they are what they are. Like record wise, you're going to be what you are. And if you can, like, that's why I said beginning of the season, okay, you could win fewer games and still be better positioned to make a playoff run. But I'm not sitting here telling you today on January 4th, Happy New Year, by the way. I'm not sitting here telling anybody that this team is positioned to make this great playoff run.
No.
But I'm also outside of a few teams. I don't know what the hell the West is right now. I mean, the Minnesota freaking Timberwolves aren't going anywhere, and they're the top team in the West. That's crazy right now. I don't think anyone would have predicted that. You've got just so much disjointedness throughout the entire conference that you're looking at Phoenix going, what are you doing? All of a sudden, here's the Clippers on the rise again. Is anyone believe in that? They probably should, but based off of their history, I don't know that anyone is. The Warriors are out of the play-in tournament at the moment. They're
Yeah,
about to
like
get Draymond Green back. Like, there's just so much question marks throughout the Western Conference. I just think that the Kings are part of that. But at the end of the day, if you look at the overarching season, the first half of the season so far, a lot of the problems that they have remain the same, and a lot of their strengths that they have are the same. However they win or lose, like, doesn't matter how it feels. At the end of the day, you're still 5th in the West. Like, you're still positioning yourself for a nice playoff positioning, which is what they need to do. How do you go about doing it? How do you answer some of the shortcomings that you have at the deadline to see if you can bolster yourself?
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because again, you're not 5th in the West if you don't just tank 2 games against bad teams in the same week. And that's just, again, it's not who this team was last year. And I know you can't hold on to what it was last year,
Right.
but at this point, that's what your comparison piece is what they were last year. And right now it's like, okay, you are a middle of the pack team right now in just about every single thing. And like it could only be a matter of time before the teams that are 9, 10, 11, which, again, are like the Suns, the Lakers, and the Warriors, figure it out and aren't 9, 10, 11 anymore. And,
Yeah.
and again, if you want to get to the end of the season and the difference between you being in the play-in game or you having home field advantage was lost because you laid down against a bad Charlotte Hornets team in January, or a bad Portland Trailblazers team in late December, it's a little tough, and that's where I would look at. So,
I'll just
um,
add that I think like long term that there's been 2 really big positive developments for the team this year, and that's obviously De'Aaron Fox just all of a sudden becoming an elite 3-point shooter. Like, I don't
yeah,
know that elite will stick or it deserves to be like labeled as he's just for sure elite. He's currently elite, 39% from 3, 8.7 a game. His confidence is through the roof. Obviously, there was a game, I think it's the Atlanta game. He took 16 of his 20 shots from beyond the arc and
yeah,
made
he had
half of them.
15 threes made in a combined 2 games right there.
It's ridiculous, and I feel great about them every time they go up personally. Like he's knocking them down at a great rate, and one of the biggest things that you need as a team that's trying to build your way towards championship contention eventually is a guy that's good enough to be the best player on that team. And if you feel like De'Aaron is becoming that guy, that's a huge development for this team. And then the other one I'd point out is Keegan Murray. Like, offensively, struggling a bit from 3 specifically. Again, said it earlier, 35.5% on just under 7 attempts a game from beyond the arc. But his defense, he's probably been the best defender. It's probably not even really close on the Kings
Yeah.
throughout the course of this season. He's guarding twos while you're out there. If you wanted to go with the big lineup, say we're just throwing out a hypothetical here. Say you traded for Lauri Markkanen. You could start Keegan at the 2 and Harrison and Lauri and Domas. Like, Keegan is guarding twos. Why not? Like, he's giving you so much flexibility. I think that development for what it means for the future of the team when it comes to Fox and Keegan is really big for long-term roster construction.
No, I totally agree. I would say even the erratic play by Keegan Murray, it's because he's a second-year player. Like, that's totally fine. For a second-year player to be all over the board, it's typical for him to have 28 one night and then have a stretch where he's averaging 8 points a game for the last 5 games or whatever it was. It's the other guys that the erratic play has got to stop. It's the Harrison Barnes. It's the Kevin Huerters. It's that group of players that you're just looking at going, man, like, there are certain nights where, you play yourself off the court in the first 5 minutes of the game and you're too solid of a veteran to have that be the dip, for that to be the issue. And so, like, I agree with you. There are some really exciting things to point to. I'd even say that, like, Sabonis is quietly stringing together like one of the strongest, like, 10 game, 15 game stretches that we've ever seen from a Kings player. I mean, the dude's got 5 triple doubles in the last 9 games. He's the league leader, the league leader in rebounds. He's had 15 boards or more in the last 3 games. Like, what he's doing statistically is off the charts. So we're starting to see him, and then throw Malik Monk in there. You got 4 guys that you can write in with pen what you're going to get almost every night, except for Keegan, who's a little erratic. And that, again, goes to being a young player. Now you need to find the other pieces. You need to figure out what it is that you're going to get from these other guys, because as of right now, it's not enough.
Yeah. And 3 years ago, Denver starting Will Barton or Gary Harris and Paul Millsap. And those guys sound like current Kevin Huerter and Harris Barnes to me. It's just a slow process. And if you have your core in place, then you feel like you can build around that. Like, I think this team's in an okay spot for, like, zooming way out for roster construction and, like, years down the line and where you go from here.
I totally agree. Let's talk about that. We'll do the business of basketball. We're like a month away, like, from the NBA trade deadline. Like, the rumors about Zach LaVine wanting to come to Sacramento, yeah, whatever, that's fine. He can want to go wherever he wants. Like, I'm not sure that that's an answer. But are there any answers out there? I mean, I think we're all looking at this team and kind of going, okay, I think I know who they are at this point. Or maybe you don't, because of the erratic play. Sean and I discussed this last week. What did we discuss? It was Sean. It was, what are the types of players you don't want, right? And your answer was Zach LaVine. My answer is Zach LaVine. I don't want a bloated $50 million a year player that doesn't play defense and just
the caveat there was, if it's the only move you're making, I don't see how that helps Kings win games. If there are multiple moves that can be made before the break.
You were talking about like $90 million in moves, so there's no way to make like $90 million in moves, Sean.
Right.
Like, that dude makes $42 million. You can't add Pascal Siakam, and that now we're at 80 million. It's like, but go ahead.
But if there was a poor man's version of there, or a more bargain hunting, and he ended up being one of several moves that were made, or if this team looks dramatically different for all intents and purposes at the trade deadline, then I can envision success with Zach LaVine, but it would have to mean that there are that this team looks dramatically different. So I'm not willing to necessarily throw that idea completely out the window, but the reality of seeing that happen is very.
If I disappear, it's
unlikely.
me throwing it out the window. It's me chucking it out said window right now. On like if that's a move they make, I'm shaking my head. And I also, if that's a move they make, I don't think Monty McNair is making the decisions, and that would be even worse. So
Well, so what I did say though was I said I don't want to see this team as much as I do feel that they need to add. I've always been on the wing position, like a guy who can get you a bucket, but also have a defensive minded presence, or at least not be a shill defensively, but somebody who's capable of just you can get the ball to and he can get you a bucket. I just don't want to see a bulk shooter. I don't want to see a guy who goes out there to chuck 20 points to get, or 20 shots to get 20 points. Those types of things with the way this offense is or designed to be, playing through Sabonis, giving Fox some help offensively, I think is the right mindset. But I don't feel that bringing somebody in that's just going to be a chucker is what the Kings need.
I think there's like a handful of interesting names that I've looked at throughout the last
you got a list? We got a list?
I could rattle off some. I'm a big Dorian Finney-Smith guy. I love Dorian Finney-Smith. I think that him and Keegan as your 3-4 would be great for this team. He knocks down threes. Talked about as a great locker room guy. Like Dallas loved having him there. You could even look at Royce O'Neal on that roster. If you want to look in Chicago, everybody loves Alex Caruso for damn good reason. There's also Torrey Craig right there that I think would be helpful for this team. Matisse Thybulle, we just saw in Portland. And I will say there is some conversations recently about DeJounte Murray that are somewhat interesting to me. I don't think that does it for me, but I think it's somewhat interesting. He hits threes. His defense hasn't been the same it has been in years past throughout the course of this season. But just rattling off a handful of names, there's different guys out there. There's still going to be the Pascal Siakam conversations or Lauri Markkanen if people want to go in that direction and consider that. You can talk about PJ Washington. We just saw come into town. There's a lot of potential options as there is every year. And I think if you're really looking at okay, we have our core three, how do we go get our Aaron Gordon, KCP, that there's a decent amount of those guys around the league.
I think, okay, so I think the better question might be, do any of those players, I mean, clearly Siakam, right? He changes who you are as a team. But does anyone that you mention, whether it's Torrey Craig or it's Dorian Finney-Smith, do they change really the outcome of this season? I think last year we looked at some of these potential improvements, right? I kept pushing the same, everyone hates hearing it, Plumlee and Matisse Thybulle. If you could add those two pieces, number one, I don't think you would have got dominated on the offensive glass like you did against the Golden State Warriors. And having Matisse Thybulle as another option to go defend Steph Curry would have helped you in the playoffs. So I would say that that's kind of where you were. But this year, it kind of feels like you've moved on from the tertiary move, the little move that will help you solidify yourself as a 50-win team. You're kind of playing in a different talent pool, if that makes sense. So I agree. Some of those players make sense, but those are I need 3 of those moves.
Right.
And if I was going to do one of those moves, or I need a Siakam move, or I need something like that. And I don't think Lauri Markkanen's going to come available. And even if they did, I'm not sure the Kings would mortgage 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps to go get Lauri Markkanen. And I don't think Pascal Siakam's going to cost the same thing. So yeah, I would be all in on Pascal Siakam like Sean has been the whole time. So I think the question more is what level of player do you guys think the Kings need as of right now? Because I think the level of player they need is pretty high. I don't
Yeah, I'd
think
agree with you.
the C list. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree, but I will say of the ones that he mentioned, I mean, certainly Markkanen would be amazing. I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think DeJounte Murray is realistic, although why do I feel like he's going to be a Laker? I just
Dude,
feel
they're
like
open
that's
for
unlikely.
business. I've
Right.
had conversations. Atlanta's okay, yeah, what do we got? Who wants in?
But of all the ones that were in there, and I don't know that it's even realistic in this way either. But Caruso makes so much sense. I just if you're Chicago, I just don't know why you would. He's at such a great contract. Even if Chicago completely blows it up, which I get, but I don't think he's he's not the one you necessarily throw out with the wash. So,
Would
but
he move a needle
of
though?
the ones, yeah, I think so. I really do. I think Caruso does move the needle because I think he brings an elite defender to this team. He can get you a bucket at times. He's a ball handler. I think it's adds some size to the backcourt. I think that's a huge move for the Sacramento Kings. But the reality of them being able to get him, I think would be that's another thing. I don't know that they can get him.
And I also will add that, like, maybe some of them don't move the needle that much this year, but it doesn't have to be all about this year. You know,
Right.
if you do, like you mentioned, maybe you need 3 of those to really feel good, do that over the course of 2 years. You know what I mean? And then down the line, like going back to the Denver comparison, you know, it was offseason, they got Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray's out the whole year. They kind of step back, or midseason. And then next offseason, they go and get KCP, you know? So like, I think it could happen over time, sort of thing. And I don't really know. I more so recently thought of maybe they do just want to roll with this and increase those complementary pieces, and was trying to look at it from that angle. But certainly getting another bigger caliber player, I mean, it's not going to hurt.
I'm gonna say the bad name then, because I don't know how it hasn't come
Don't
up.
do it. If I hear Sadiq Bey one more goddamn time, I'm gonna hang up this pot. Okay, thank God.
No, I mean no, no, because
He
again,
is
that's not
outlawed.
the level. That's not the
Okay.
level of player that I'm talking about. I'm not a huge fan of his game, although I like the idea of his game better than him in actuality. But I went through and looked at Kyle Kuzma's contract, and it's 25.5 this year. It's 23.5 next year. It's 21.5 the year after that, and it's 19.5 the year after that. It's basically the Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes contracts that Ken Cantanella signed, and he's 28 years old. He fits everything that you need, except for he might not be as good a three-point shooter or as good a defender as like some of these other options, which don't exist. Like, but I don't.
Which don't
I
exist.
hate talking myself into Kyle Kuzma, but
Why?
the Kings
I like Kuz.
traded. Okay, the
Yeah,
Kings were
why?
trading for Kyle Kuzma. When Monty McNair traded, was like 2 seconds away. A trade call almost happens, and they almost landed him for Buddy Hield. They kicked the tires on him this offseason. They had negotiated some contract talks with Harrison Barnes. Then they stopped contract negotiations with Harrison Barnes. They went and looked at a couple other players, including Kyle Kuzma. They came back to Harrison Barnes. If you can, here is the question I would ask. If there's a way to get Kyle Kuzma without giving up Harrison Barnes, would you guys be like all in on that or no? Because I mean, I could make a just the numbers wise. If you were to do they want multiple first round picks. I don't think they're getting multiple first round picks for Kyle Kuzma. If you were to offer Kevin Huerter, Davion Mitchell a first round pick that's protected and a second or 2 seconds, that might be enough to get Kyle Kuzma. And that would mean that Harrison Barnes now becomes your third forward. Yes or no?
It's an easy yes for me.
Yeah, it's nuts. But you figure that part out. You figure the rotation and all that kind of stuff. You figure that out. I mean, you're certainly going to still need to upgrade other areas. You're still going to need to figure out some depth. But yeah, adding Kyle Kuzma is not a problem for the Sacramento Kings. That's something that you would do. And I don't know if I agree if that's what it takes to get that done. But if so, yeah, absolutely.
I may be holding on to this too much, but if you go back to that Bubbles final, he was so good defensively. Like, there is a good defender within Kyle Kuzma. And I personally believe in...
That's like saying that there's good in Darth Vader. That's still good in it. Darth Vader, by the way, was
Stop
Star
it, Sean.
Wars, which I
Stop
don't
it,
think
Sean.
Star
I know
Wars.
this.
He is
Stop
Luke
it.
Skywalker's
Spoiler
father.
alert.
His real name
Spoiler
is
alert.
Anakin Skywalker.
He goes, I still feel there's good in him. Okay. The only thing that makes Kyle Kuzma, like, and I get what you're saying, but let's make no mistake, he is an offensive weapon, okay? but he's 6'9". He's got great size. He's quick. He can take up space, and he rebounds really well. So
I know.
yeah, I mean, like if the one-on-one defensive stuff isn't great, but team defense, I can see it.
Okay. I just figure, I hate asking, but like,
But he gets you a
sort
bucket,
of,
man. Like that. Yeah. Sorry, James.
no, it seems like he's the guy that like maybe not be a true second scorer, but could be really close to that. And the fact that he averages, like, I like Kyle Kuzma his first year in Washington, 17.9 points, 8.5 rebounds, 0.9 blocks. Like, that's the guy that I would circle and say, how do you find that Kyle Kuzma? Can you pull that player back out of him? I don't like that he's really, really into the lifestyle. I don't like that he chose to
What do
go
you mean?
back to, well, I mean, he just like I need
You
I
didn't
need
like
to make
that
sure
sweater
he's
he wore, did you?
The pink one was crazy.
well, no, I need to make sure that he's a serious player. And it's
Right.
like still, like, because he plays for a not serious team, probably the most unserious team that we've ever seen in the NBA, with a bunch of dudes who just go around like chucking up shots and doing whatever they want. But also, like, he decided to go back there. He had opportunities for very similar money that was sitting there, that he could have gone other places, and he chose to go back to so he could score a bunch of points. Like, I need to
Right.
make sure that he learned his lesson from that decision and, like, get me out of here, because this Washington situation has turned bad, like, really quickly. And if he can be a player that understands that, then sure. But if he thinks he's going to come into Sacramento and go put up the numbers that he's putting up in Washington and not worry about winning, then that's not who I want on my team.
And as a guy, I know I said a minute ago, I don't want to add a chucker to the team. He has to play that role for Washington. He has to be that guy that puts up 19, 20 shots a game to average 24.
I
That's not
agree,
who
but
that's not who he is, and that's not who he would be with the Kings.
he
He can be a
chose
guy
to
that
be
can,
that guy. He chose to
well, and
be
he
that
went for
guy,
the
Sean.
money. He went for the money. He had to, I mean, I don't
The
fault a guy
Kings
for
had
going for the
$25
money.
million to offer. They did.
Look, you go, you're going to be the guy. He went to get his money and he controlled his own destiny and he could be the guy. It hasn't worked, but
I
he
think
also,
that's what
hey,
I'm talking about. Does
well,
he?
but to that point, James, a year later, he could be on a different team. You know what I mean? So that
Yeah.
he still gave it the run. He still gave, like, he used that to improve his situation. If he ends up on a better team, great, so be it. I'm with you. Is he all about winning? Probably not, but he's also experienced a little bit of that. So,
And I
Well,
think
he's
it's
also
also
experienced the other side.
I think it's also betting on your culture and coaching staff to get the best out of a guy, which I feel pretty good about right now. Mike Brown
Yeah, I
getting the
think so
best
too.
out of somebody, and this team
Right.
culture, like somebody fitting into it, and that pulling the best out of someone.
Well, and what I mean too is, like, I don't want people to just, I was hinting at it, but yeah, championship in 2020. So, like, the fact that he's already experienced what it's like to win, and now he had to go try to, make the best of it, get the best money you can get, put yourself to be a top scoring option. Like, I don't begrudge him at all for that. Even if it means, look, he knew he was going to Washington. They're not going to be good. What's it look like in 2-3 years? Like, he's still young enough to where he could be a centerpiece. That's how he's looking at it. But again, the league changes quickly. He could be on a different team in 6 months, 10 months later. So
Yeah. All right. Well, to wrap that one up, so he's available to trade on January 15th. That is 11 days from now. So all of us are a thumbs up. Look
So
at that.
you
I
how do you
made
do
the
that?
thumbs
I
up
can't
button.
even do that. How do you make that
What?
happen? That's probably just a superpower you have over there.
I think it's because I'm really cool. I don't know. I don't know how
For the
that
audio
happened.
listeners, James puts his finger, his thumbs up, and then he gets a little digital, little animation that comes up.
I
Little
got
bubble.
an animated. I don't know how that happened, but I'm
Mine
okay
doesn't
with
do
it.
that.
Bubble ring.
You guys just keep
What if I
trying.
went down?
Keep trying.
I can't do it.
Of course, you'd try that.
I don't know why. It was so yes, everyone is a thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are players I would like probably better, but yeah, if that was especially with the the offer that you had put out on the table, I think that would go over pretty well for sure.
Is that an offer you think is reasonable?
I
Probably gonna
don't
be a
think
little
that
more.
gets it done. Yeah, I don't think that offer gets it done.
You
Like
think
you're
like a
first and
Washington,
a
you
swap
just
or
signed him.
something?
Go ahead and outlay it. Say what the offer was again in your mind. What it gets done. I just don't see it being attractive.
Huerter,
enough.
Mitchell, a first and a future and a second?
Yeah, I don't think it does it.
It's
I
not that
probably
far off, though.
Don't think so either. Yeah, I mean, how far is the first we're talking about, and what sort of protections? I
2026.
guess like
James, no offense, buddy, but that was the equivalent of what you see on message boards so often, where it's like, let me find all the shit that isn't working with the Kings, throw it out there with a first round pick, and I'm going to get somebody who is thought of as a B talent in the league. That's going to, like, I just don't.
Okay, no,
To me, I don't
but
see why Washington would do that.
yeah, but like I'm not saying, hey, throw Harrison Barnes, a 31-year-old guy. I mean, Kevin Huerter's 25 years old, and
No, I
Davion
get it, but he's
Mitchell,
also
like,
you're talking about two guys who aren't a part of your rotation, really. You know what I mean? That are lower
no,
level
but
rotation at this point.
I'd also add in that no matter what, you're gonna have to match salaries for a guy like Kuzma. So you're not, in my opinion, you're not trading Kuzma in this situation for the players you're getting. So that's not what I'm doing there. Like you're
Yeah.
trading Kuzma to move off of the money and to get picks.
But with respect, if I'm Washington, I'm hanging up the phone.
I
Like
mean,
that's not value.
Well, yeah, but
That's not
if
value
he's
to
up
trade a
for
guy that you just
grabs,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
I think. Look, I mean, look at recent trades. Like, I think it's going to take multiple first round picks without swaps, without that's just how you can want in one hand and what else in the other and see what happens first. But I'll say I think that they're gonna want something for Kuzma. They're gonna want a return that's going to be more substantial than what you're
I mean,
kind of
they're
displaying
literally.
there.
I mean, like the word on the street is they're asking for two. They're asking for multiple first round picks. Well,
Yeah,
like
as they
two
should.
first round picks. Yeah, but like a lot of teams ask for two first round picks. Like a
Right.
lot of times, two first round picks is a first and 2 seconds, or maybe a first and a second. Like I don't know that you're getting two first round picks for Kyle Kuzma.
Well, it's tough from the
Unless
Kings' perspective, where like the players you're throwing in are just not great or like great value. Like I think that
Right.
Kevin Huerter's fine, Harrison Barnes is fine. I don't think those guys are necessarily negative value on their deals or anything like that. But like you look at the OG trade, it's players that are the main return there, obviously. And it's like any deal that the Kings make, their players that are included are gonna just kind of be whatever. So
Yeah,
it has to be picks.
And
but
you
my
have team
response,
control with Kuzma as opposed to somebody like OG who was about to enter free agency or is. I
yeah,
shouldn't
but
say was.
at the same time, like every team that you're dealing with has their own motivation for trading a player. Washington has to start over. Toronto's not starting over. Toronto's trying to match a timeline with a young star in Scotty Barnes, and that's why they wanted a 23-year-old and a 24-year-old in RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. That's not the case with every team. So yeah, the value of what you're getting, like, would Washington maybe prefer expiring contracts? Maybe, but I don't know. Like Kevin Herter's deal really isn't that bad. It's 2 more years at $35 million. You have to pay somebody.
Yeah.
Davion Mitchell has 1 more year left on his deal. Like Washington's not a free agent like hub where you can go get all kinds of players. Like Herter would play valuable minutes for them for the next 2 years after this year. So,
Well, I mean, Washington not only is it they're already starting over. Like they've got a bunch of young players. They have hardly any veterans.
they don't have a single young player that you just circle and say, "Okay, I'm building around." None. You're not building around Denny
I would agree
Avdija.
with that. No, I
You're
would agree
not
with
building
that.
around Jordan Poole. You're financially maybe building around Jordan Poole, but like I don't know. I think it's interesting because again, like every team that you're going to trade with, they have their own motivations for why they're trading. The Kings' motivation is to take the next step. The Raptors' motivation was to get younger. A lot of teams' motivation is to get draft picks. So Yeah, and that's where Washington, if I'm, they're going to be looking at draft picks. If they could get expiring contracts, that might make sense to them. But even that, I don't know if that makes sense. So, all right. What do we got for final thoughts? Let's start with Brenden. Brenden, what do you got?
The Lakers are a shit show, and it's great. It's great. It's great. It sounds like Darvin Ham is pretty likely on the way out. And I'm trying to find the quote in here. Yeah, okay. There's currently, this is from Shams Charania, Jovan Buha, The Athletic, right? There's currently a deepening disconnect between Darvin Ham and the Lakers locker room. 6 sources with direct knowledge of the situation say. Have you guys ever seen 6? That's ridiculous.
I've seen multiple. Usually you just say multiple.
I want to see like
6 is crazy.
Who are the 6? Because if it's like Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes,
No. It's LeBron James. It's LeBron.
Rich Paul, Maverick Carter,
Paul, and then LeBron James again.
Yeah, Jimmy Spencer's one. Just throw him in there. Jimmy Spencer can say no, but we need to make a change. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would just say
going to shit.
Yeah, I mean, then what? You know what I mean? Like the Lakers, like they gassed out. They put all their eggs into the in-tournament basket. It seems in season tournament, and they partied like as if it was a championship, which good for them. But yeah, they've been bad, and Gabe Vincent, who was one of the players they went after this past offseason and landed him, and he hasn't played all year. He's been hurt and he's going to be out for a little while longer. My question is okay, great. You fired Darvin Ham, then what? I mean, the reality is like LeBron James and the Lakers need to have a divorce. Like the Lakers need to, they just need to separate it, in my opinion. Like Anthony Davis is your guy. It's always been that way for the past 2 years, especially. But after they won, like doing what you're just trying to appease LeBron at this point, and you're just not positioned well to do it. And
so what Sean is saying is
crazy.
Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, Davion Mitchell, and a first round.
Right. Just trade LeBron.
You know what's wild that I feel like isn't being talked about is that LeBron is a player option for next year. And this is the year that Bronny's supposed to get drafted. And he's publicly declared that he wants to play with Bronny.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a thing or what? And the Kings traded away their first rounder, of course. The King can't be a king.
Oh,
they can acquire one.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, there's a really good chance that if it wasn't for that fact that that Bronny slides to the second round. Like, I mean, we're talking about a kid who unfortunately has a heart problem, and not only that, but he is not a surefire first round pick at all. So
I think he's been better as of late, but yeah, more to prove for sure.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the Lakers built a team around LeBron James and thought that bringing in like D'Angelo Russell, Cam Reddish, Rui Hachimura, Christian Wood, Jared Vanderbilt, Jackson Hayes, they didn't bring in winners. They didn't go out and find a bunch of dudes who can help you get over the hump.
These guys just fell off their couch hearing that.
Well, no, I mean, Rui,
but it's you're in salary. There's a lot of
like,
salary cap. Yeah,
I guess, but I mean, you trade him.
Like
and I'm not saying he's a bad player, but like,
I think Rui can help the Kings.
There's enough out there on a lot of these players to tell you that they're not guys who make winning basketball plays. I mean, Rui was in Washington for long enough to get a little bit of that stink on him. So I don't know.
And the Lakers traded away Westbrook for D'Lo and some other guys, but Mike Conley's in that deal as well. And Mike Conley looks real damn good in Minnesota right now, and probably would be a way better fit in LA than D'Lo. Just saying.
They absolutely love him up there. Absolutely love him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into what's happened to that Lakers squad. And you saw like the Doc Rivers rumors, right? They're like, maybe Doc will take over. Like, okay.
He's going to call their game the night before and then suit up on the second night of a back-to-back.
Yeah, he'll be super generous about what he's saying the entire game. And then we're like, why is he being so nice? Why is he saying how good Christian Wood is? And how LeBron James still has so much in the tank. And then next day you're like, The other name
to the other name to monitor there, and I don't know that it would happen, but Mark Jackson would be the other name.
That just sounds wonderful.
I know it does.
I am all
actually,
for this.
Yeah,
the one that has the most chaos to it is actually Doc Rivers, because I just for some reason have a hard time picturing Doc Rivers and LeBron James.
Who are other like Terry Stotts? Like, who are other guys out there that didn't get jobs? James Borrego? Like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Well, you remember David Fizdale was a hot commodity for so
Right.
long. I don't know.
I don't know that he still is. Like, I mean,
but
Dave Yeager's
let's
out
be
there.
honest. A lot of these guys don't want to pick up midseason, and likely wouldn't pick up midseason. And so at that point, what are you doing? Because now you're just wasting another year of LeBron. So
yeah, no, it's chaos, man.
It's a tough part of being in the Lakers, because you expect greatness all the time. You've got the arguably the generation's biggest talent on your team in his later years. Father Time has certainly caught up with him, even though he's still putting up incredible numbers. He'll be on another All-Star team, mainly for fan votes. But I mean, you can see it. You can see that just the usage on him. And then when they were talking about earlier in the season how they were going to try and keep his minutes down, it's tough.
He's still averaging 25, 7.4 assists, and 7.3 rebounds in 34.3 minutes per game. That's pretty impressive.
AD's playing some of his best basketball too, and it's
not. And LeBron shooting 39.5% from three.
Yeah,
like I know Father Time is like clawing at him there, but
he might be Father Time.
He slayed that beast for way longer than anyone thought. So
yeah. He gave Father Time a run for his money.
He did.
He gave him two black eyes, that's for sure.
Yeah, he dunked on him a couple of times. Yeah. Okay. Sean, do you have any final thoughts? Brenden just got us sidetracked there.
Yeah, he did. Those were nice. I forgot we were in final thoughts. Just hey, people, don't kill each other over Stanley Cups, especially the pink one or the red one or whatever the hell it was. That's crazy.
I think of hockey every time I hear that. I don't even watch
Brenden,
hockey.
You weren't here the last time in our last podcast, and I said that I had seen the movie Poor Things, which is one of the trippiest movies I've seen in a long time. I don't even know if I like it, but I hadn't stopped being able to think about it. And as you not being a real movie guy, I want you to watch it and then report back to me, because I think me recommending it to you, you'll watch it, you'll come and look at me like I have three heads on my shoulders. You're going to go, what the hell was that? And sure. I wonder if you'll like it. Seriously.
I'm intrigued.
I did realize the other day I had like a little road trip, and we pulled up just random road trip questions. And one of them, it was great. And one of them was, what's your favorite scary movie? And I realized I could list a decent amount of scary movies. So apparently, just over the years, that's what I've seen more than anything. But what was the one you recommended?
Poor Things with Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo, Jared Carmichael has an appearance in there.
Sure.
My favorite scary movie is Glitter.
Glitter. Don't know
I think I know that.
It's horrific. It's with Mariah Carey.
That's not a scary movie, right? It's just a bad
depends
movie.
on who you ask.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, is that the Mariah Carey movie? It's like,
I will say it wasn't intended to be scary, but it scared the shit out of me. That movie was
like, wow, that was made. Yeah. Okay, final thoughts. I don't know. We got to get through this week.
Window.
This is like I don't know about you guys. I've had a long week of like the back-to-backs at home.
Where's the violin?
Friday, we got a game on Sunday. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from this team night in, night out. But I don't know. Overall, it's been a fun season because they're not. I mean, they're interesting. They're like a weird science experiment to watch play out. So I don't really have a whole lot else going on besides that. I'm just tired. I'm very tired. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. That's going to do it for this edition of the KINGSBEAT podcast. If you're still watching somehow, give us a thumbs up. I don't know. Let's see if we can do it again.
I think you're too pixelated.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
What the hell?
I don't know. You can try it again, Brenden.
No, I'm going to bring real bubbles next episode.
You're going to bring real bubbles and oh wow, bubbles and candles.
You would have bubbles.
All kinds of
not?
weird ass going on. Okay. Jump on board with Prize Picks. Jump on board with the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com and become a premium subscriber. We'll have a happy hour. It's just been, my schedule's been chaos, and just finding time for us to get a podcast together has been extremely difficult for all three of us. So we'll do the best we can to get one as soon as possible, and we'll find a guest. Cool. So for Box 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 on the Kings Beat. See you soon.